One of the truths that you learn when you're a grown-up is that virtually every piece of mail that arrives at your home on government letterhead is a piece of mail you probably don't want to receive. I think there are probably only two exceptions to this rule. One, if you're lucky enough to qualify for an income tax refund. And two, when you get your first driver's license when you're a teenager. Beyond that, nothing is good if it comes to your house in a government envelope. And there is a very particular and specific feeling of dismay that arrives when you receive in the mail, as I did just a number of weeks ago, an official-looking government envelope on which is printed in large black letters, "Official Jury Summons." Now, being a rabbi carries with it a long list of richly rewarding benefits. One of the benefits that you may not be aware of, however, is that when you're a rabbi and you are summoned for jury duty, you will almost never be picked to serve as a juror. I'm not completely sure why it is. I suspect it's because most attorneys assume that members of the clergy bring certain biases about guilt and innocence. Maybe that they think we're beholden to our own religious codes about ethics and behavior, and so it would be too hard for us to follow a judge's instructions about how to render a verdict. Nevertheless, when I arrived at county court on Monday to answer my summons, I was swiftly and decisively selected. I know. Along with 11 of my fellow citizens, to hear a case over the following days and render a verdict for the court. If you have ever sat on a jury, you may have experienced some of the feelings I'm embarrassed to share with you that I felt when I was first seated in the box with my fellow jurors. It is true that our legal system deliberately establishes no requirements for serving on a jury outside of citizenship, the ability to receive and respond to instructions in English, and a baseline level of physical and mental wellness. You can be a person who is vengeful or obstinate. You can be uneducated and believe in the wildest irrational conspiracy theories imaginable. You can hold hostile prejudices against lawyers or judges, and you may still find yourself entrusted with the authority to make life-changing decisions for the parties in the case. It wasn't until I was actually selected to serve that it dawned on me just how crazy it is for us to have this system that allows everyday yahoos like you and me to render binding judgments for our peers. You can't call yourself a doctor or offer legal advice without the approval and certification of the professional boards that govern those fields of study. All of the denominations of modern Judaism work the same way. You can't just call yourself a rabbi or a cantor without the proper credentialing and ordination processes. And this is because we understand that the work we do is so important and consequential, and it may be risky to entrust a person with a certain sort of influence without some kind of mechanism in place to evaluate whether they're able to handle it responsibly. That is a tradition that goes all the way back to biblical times, when our most ancient literatures describe the ways in which a person could be considered qualified to lead the Jewish people and make decisions that would affect the direction of the whole community. The kings of ancient Israel and Judea had to come from royal bloodlines. They had to be formally anointed with oil by the high priest before they could assume the throne. Religious leadership, the great spiritual virtuosos of the ancient world like Abraham, Moses, Samuel, Isaiah, all of them were qualified for their roles by receiving direct personal selection from God, a burning bush, a prophecy received in dreams or visions, or a still small voice whispering in a quiet moment. But there's another category of Israelite leadership that functioned differently from these first two. The priesthood, whose job was the administration of the sacrifices and the precise maintenance of the holy places where the Israelites brought their offerings to God. This was infinitely high-stakes work. The sacrifices were the way that they communicated with God, and only by performing the services precisely as God commanded them could they be assured that God would listen and show favor to the Jewish people. Which is what makes it surprising and ironic that the priest's ordination contained much less supernatural and religious content than those of prophets and kings. The Torah portion that we read, the Shabbat, deals with the ordination of this first group of priests and the ceremony by which they were selected for service. The passage marks the formal creation of the priestly class and describes the details surrounding the initiation of Aaron and his sons, a special sacrificial offering, and an anointing of blood on their ears, hands, and feet. The priesthood was similar to the monarchy up to a certain point. A person couldn't become a priest without the proper lineage, but coming from the right family was not sufficient to allow someone to offer sacrifices to God. A prospective priest couldn't assume the responsibilities of leadership until he was ordained by the community. The thing that made him qualified for his job was not any particular distinction of wisdom or talent, but the fact that when the community summoned him to service, he answered the call. Now, this is surprising because of how central the priestly experience was to Israelite society. The priests and their work was the living soul of ritual worship, the executors of the political and religious function of the community. Without them, the link between the people and God could be broken. How surprising, then, that we and our ancestors entrusted this vital work to relative novices and commoners. And at the same time, how beautiful to place this responsibility into the hands of trusted peers. Now, it is, I realize, inaccurate and anachronistic and unfair for me to draw too many comparisons between the ancient biblical priesthood and today's American justice system, so I don't want to put too fine a point on this, but let me just say this. To build and maintain a system in which you entrust your fellow citizens with the responsibility to make life-changing decisions for your community is both deeply risky and profoundly inspiring. To put your faith in the hands of your fellow men and women and trust that they will do the right thing, and do so not grudgingly but happily, what an amazing statement of confidence and faith in the principles that undergird your society. The trial for which I sat as juror only lasted a couple of days. When it came to an end, I was the one who presented the verdict to the judge and received her thanks for our service and the role we played in the exercise of justice. It made me feel patriotic, made me feel proud, and the feelings of cynicism and suspicion that I was embarrassed to admit to you dissipated. In the place of feelings about cynicism and suspicion for my fellow jurors, I felt gratitude and respect. None of us knew each other's names. None of us knew anything about each other's jobs or families. We knew each other only by our juror numbers and our seating position around the table. When we worked our way toward a verdict, all the other parts of our identities fell away, and we were drawn together in a world that contained only the facts of the case and the judge's charge about how to carry out her instructions and arrive at decisions that were right and just. It is not exactly accurate for me to describe the work that we did and the consensus at which we arrived as a holy thing. That category doesn't really fit the exercise of the law in American civic life, but it was, if not holy, transcendent. Because all of us answered a call to transcend the ways in which we are normally known in our willingness to come together under the shared responsibility of helping to move society toward fairness and toward justice, one very small step at a time. When the decisions were made and the verdict presented to the court, we all went our separate ways, knowing we might never see each other again, but confident in our knowledge that we had performed a necessary duty for the healthy function of our city. The Judaism that I believe in is based in my experience with and my belief in the holy. I am who I am, and I do what I do because I think that there are eternal ideas at the heart of Jewish life and Jewish culture that transcend everyday human experience. And I also know that a fully realized Jewish life can't be lived in the clouds. We can't be navel-gazing mystics who shut out the world and try to exist in rarefied individual communion with God. For holiness to be useful, we need to put it in the hands of human beings. It is the same with the exercise of justice in our communities. The legal theories and principles that fill the bookshelves of every attorney's office are good, but they cannot be exercised fully without the presence of real human beings. We bring those principles down to earth into this human world filled with flawed and imperfect human beings and tell them, here, do your very best to make this place fairer. The ordination ceremony of the ancient priests was a ritualization of their willingness to take on the work of leadership, to fortify the channel between the standards of perfect justice on high and the messy, dirty, bloody world below, our world, that may always be marginally improved by the devoted efforts of people of reason and conscience. That is how justice gets done, and how a broken world moves toward repair. We, imperfect human beings, responding from our imperfection, but answering the eternal call to participate in the healing of our world. I pray that God will strengthen all of us who do this work, and may the words of the prophet be fulfilled, that justice will roll down like waters, and righteousness like a mighty stream. Shabbat Shalom.